I used to believe that if something in your life was going to break, it would announce itself like a truck downshifting on the Dan Ryan loud, grinding impossible to ignore. What I learned is that the biggest failures arrive like a draft under the door. One day your wife starts putting her phone face down. One day the laughter in your kitchen has a new shape. One day you look up and realize your family table has 3 chairs and 4 stories living at it. I'm David. I'm 40. I own a small fleet of box trucks that do last mile runs around Chicagoland. If you've ever had a sofa delivered in the rain and the driver was the kind of person who brought it in without touching your white walls, there's a chance that driver worked for me. I'm not glamorous, but I'm reliable, and for most of my adult life, I thought that was the same thing as being safe. Kathy and I met on an ordinary August afternoon at the Taste of Chicago. She was with friends, I was with my cousin. We both ended up at the same roasted corn stand complaining about the line. She had eyes the color of Lake Michigan when it's pretending to be calm, and a way of speaking like she was already in on the joke, but wanted you to catch up and feel good when you did. We married in a Lutheran church on the northwest side with string lights in the fellowship hall and cupcakes instead of a cake because she said cake felt like formality for formality's sake. 2 years later, we brought home Emily, 7 pounds, 7 ounces of fierce curiosity, who would grow up to turn our house into a museum of science projects and sticky notes. By the time I turned 40, life had settled into what I thought was the good kind of rut. The business was stable. I had 6 trucks and 8 drivers. With a seventh, I kept trying to recruit out of UPS. We'd bought a modest brick bungalow near Portage Park with a basement you could finish when the time is right, which meant about the same thing as after slow season, which meant it was a storage space with ambition. Emily was finishing 8th grade, arguing about curfews like a future attorney, playing clarinet badly but with heart, and worrying about what the high school across the tracks would be like. The first sign that the rut had turned into something else was a laugh. Kathy started laughing a new laugh when she read her phone. A quick intake of breath, and then something soft. It wasn't for me. The second sign was a sudden interest in late meetings and work dinners that seemed to multiply. She worked in operations for my company. We met that way. She'd started with scheduling and moved up to client relations because she could talk a man with a temper down into a handshake as easily as she could organize a route map. Work dinners happened, but these came with lipstick applied in the bathroom after Emily went to bed and a perfume I hadn't bought. There's a story I could tell you where I didn't know. I did. You don't run trucks for years and not learn how to listen for 6 sounds. And in me, this is the part I'm not proud of. There's a mechanic with a wrench for every squeak. So when the marriage started making a sound, I thought I could tighten the right bolts. I planned a weekend away to Galena. I ordered flowers to her office. I did the extra dishes without putting them on the invisible scoreboard married people pretend they don't keep. I told myself 100 stories that said rough patch and busy season and we'll get through it. The day I stopped telling stories was a Tuesday. I'd gotten home early from a job in Schaumburg because a client rescheduled at the last minute. I was putting a frozen pizza in the oven. Kathy doesn't cook when she's stressed, and I cook like a man who learned from YouTube when I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. It had a new lock screen. The old one was a picture of Emily at the Lincoln Park Zoo with a giraffe in the background. The new one was an abstract pattern, and then a message flashed across the top before it went dark again. Can't wait to see you later. I'll bring the wine like last time. L. It's funny how your brain tries to save you. My first thought was friend from college, and my second was Lauren on her team, and my third was the truth I didn't want to pick up with my bare hands. L. Leon. Leon came into my life 3 years earlier. He was tall, charismatic in a way that makes you forgive little mistakes, and he owned a smaller trucking company that overflowed word to us when his routes got jammed. Over the course of 12 months, he became my business partner. Partnership. In our world isn't tuxedos and rings. It's contracts and distribution, dividing up the city into sensible territories, bouncing extra work back and forth so nobody has to turn down money, and nobody gets stretched so thin they start to cut corners. We made each other better. At least that's what I thought for a long time. I don't know how to describe standing in your own kitchen reading the message that ends your marriage. Emily walked in a few minutes later with a math worksheet asking if it was plus or minus when you move it to the other side, and I answered her while every system inside me was shutting down in slow motion. The pizza beeped. The dog barked at nothing. Kathy came home at 6:30 and kissed me on the cheek like a person signing for a package. I wish I could tell you I planned it, that I had a speech ready. What happened was simpler. I handed her the phone, she looked down, read the message, looked up, and in that tiny pause I understood that she built a boat in her head and this was the moment she meant to push off. She didn't deny it, she didn't invent a Lauren. She said, I'm seeing someone, and then added, it's Leon, like pulling the bandage the rest of the way off would count as mercy. Then she said, I'm not happy, and I haven't been for a long time, and the oldest line in the oldest book, I didn't mean for it to happen. We didn't fight that night. A lot of men in my situation feel that like a failure. I felt it like a choice I made for Emily, who was in her room practicing a scale that stubbornly refused to become music. We told her together the next day on the back steps. Kathy cried, "Real tears, not theater," and said the sentences the internet says you should say about this not being Emily's fault, about how both her parents adore her, about how grown-up relationships are complicated. Emily didn't cry. She got very quiet and then she asked, "Do I have to choose?" She was 14. She shouldn't have to ask that. I said, "No, not now. We'll figure it out." The divorce was fast. Kathy moved into a one-bedroom near Logan Square with plants that thrived and a couch that looked like it had opinions. 2 months later, after a few trial weekends in which she kept talking about wanting a fresh start, she and Leon moved to Boston because his cousin had a connection there with a logistics outfit trying to expand. "It's a chance to do something big," Leon told me on the phone when he called, and I remember the click in my chest when his voice dropped into the register partners use with partners, the one that says we're on the same side. We weren't. If I sound calm recounting this, it's because time sands things even when you think it shouldn't. The first weeks were raw. I slept badly. I ran longer than my knees liked. I put on a brave face for Emily that I'm sure fooled no one. My mother called every other day with recipes and prayers. People brought casseroles like we'd had a death. In a way, we had. My marriage didn't end in a storm. It ended with a choice that turned out to be a door I wasn't invited through. I kept my head down. I made sure Emily got to band and school and her friend's birthday party. I took her to the lake on Sundays and we threw bread to gulls, and she told me things about the social politics of 8th grade that felt shockingly like my industries, just with less money and more emojis. Kathy called twice a week to talk to Emily. Sometimes it was good. Sometimes Emily hung up and stomped upstairs, slamming her door, and the way I've learned means not, "I hate you, but I don't know where to put this feeling." I stayed out of the way of their conversations. When Kathy asked how I was, I said fine, because in English, fine is a useful word that means I'm not about to bleed on your shoes and I don't trust you with the details. I wish to tell you I didn't check their Instagram. I did. I saw pictures of Beacon Hill row houses and a Red Sox game where they pretended to like baseball. I saw a new haircut on Kathy and a wine bar with filament bulbs like 1,000 curated ideas of warmth. The distance made it easier to imagine they were happy. For a while, gossip is the weather that moves through extended families. Kathy's sister called me one Thursday and, after 3 minutes of Midwest polite, told me that Leon wasn't getting along with his cousin. The cousin ran a warehouse in South Boston and apparently had the charming habit of reminding everyone, loudly and often, that without him, nobody would have a job. Leon had a matching habit of resenting any man who talked like that. Leon is many things, humble is not one. "He's not adjusting," the sister said, meaning I think that he had expected to be king and found out he was just a baron. He's blaming Kat for talking him into it. It wasn't how I remembered it, but I let it go. I've learned that in other people's stories, you always play the villain or the prop, rarely the hero. Spring turned into a Chicago summer, which is to say every conversation included the words air conditioning. Emily turned 14 and asked if she could dye the ends of her hair blue. I said yes, because why not? We had cake with too much frosting and her friends filled the yard with shrieks that sounded like happiness and felt like proof that however small your house is, it's big if it holds joy. Kathy sent a gift from Boston with a note that managed to apologize and defend itself in the same sentence. Emily put the note in a drawer and wore the bracelet anyway. The call came on a Monday in late July when the sky looked like it wanted to punch the lake. Kathy's number lit up my phone at 9:41 p.m. I saw it, sat down on the edge of my bed, and answered on the second ring. "I don't know what to do," she said. She was crying that messy cry nobody chooses. He threw a vase. It hit the wall and she sucked air hard. I cut my hand. It's not deep. It bled. I bandaged it. I left. I will be honest, I didn't know how to hold all the feelings that arrived at once. Anger lives beside compassion more easily than you think. Fear has a room in the same house as love. Part of me wanted to ask all the sharp questions. What did you think would happen? Why him? Why now? And another part wanted to drive to Boston and knock on a door with my whole body. What I did was quieter. I asked, "Where are you?" She said, "Logan International." A flight had brought her to Chicago and the plane hadn't even stopped smelling like other people's stories. She took a cab to my house. I stood in the doorway because sometimes a man needs a pose so he doesn't collapse. She walked up the steps with a small bag and a big look. She had a Band-Aid on her left palm and mascara in two tired lines. She moved past me into the living room like she used to live there. The dog went wild. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs in a sleep shirt with a university she didn't attend yet. Kathy started talking without a hello. He said I made him lose his cousin. He said I wanted him small so I could feel big. He said she stopped, put a hand over her mouth, and then pulled it away like she realized how much that resembles keeping a secret. "He's not who I thought," she said with a bitter laugh. "And you knew. You always knew, David. You knew what he was, and you let me run anyway." That lit something in me I had not let burn. "No," I said, and my voice surprised me. Calm, but iron under it. I did not know. He was my partner. He was good at his job and people liked him. He was selfish, sure, and ambitious, but I didn't know he would throw things. I didn't know he'd break you. Don't put that on me to make it easier to carry. We were in the middle of that sentence when Emily came down the steps. She stood on the second to last stair, the place she used to sit when she was 7 to tie her shoes. "You don't get to do this," she said to her mother. I have never heard my daughter use that tone. Not cruel, not loud, exact. You don't get to show up and make it Dad's fault you picked a man who throws vases. You don't get to cry here and pretend you didn't break this house first. Emily, Kathy said, reaching out a hand like old reflex, I am still your mother. And I am still your daughter, Emily answered, which means I get to tell you when you're lying to yourself. You left us for him and then you left him because he's mean to you. I'm sorry he's mean to you. I'm not sorry I live here. There are moments you want to hit pause on, even when they hurt, because truth is a muscle and you can feel it getting stronger while it tears. Kathy made a sound like a laugh that forgot it was supposed to be happy. Then she looked at me, at the door, at the dog who had no idea what to do with all these human smells. Can I sleep on the couch? She asked. If you've never had your ex ask that, there's no describing how both ordinary and huge it feels. Yes, I said, because complicated is not the same thing as unkind. I got her a pillow and a blanket. I traced the cut on her hand with my eyes and knew it was the first mark, but not the first harm. She slept. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling and made lists, which is what my brain does when it thinks a list will save us. In the morning, I made coffee and texted a locksmith to ask if he could come by, not because of Kathy, but because of the new feeling the house had. Emily got ready for school with headphones in, not to avoid us, but because music lets you build a room inside a room. Kathy woke up looking older than yesterday. Did you call anyone? I asked. A counselor, a hotline, the police? She shook her head. He didn't aim it at me, she said, and then laughed at herself, a laugh I recognized from my own mouth when I told myself the incident report didn't require a real fix. I'll find a hotel, she said. I can't be here. I didn't ask her to stay. I didn't ask her to go. I handed her a list of shelters and counseling centers I printed while the coffee brewed, and I handed her my silence so she could fill it with the decision she needed to make. She took a shower and left with her bag and the Band-Aid, asking for a second chance it hadn't earned. 3 days later, I got a certified letter from a law firm in Boston saying Kathy was seeking primary custody of Emily due to my concerning emotional manipulation and restrictive parenting that stifled the child's relationship with the mother. I read it twice. My hands shook once. Then I called an attorney I trust. Her name is Alvarez, but she insists friends call her Mara, and even when she's not your friend, she speaks in sentences that hold you up like rebar. We met at a cafe where the espresso machine never stops and the chairs are designed by someone who hates posture. They're going to try to flip the story while it's still soft, she said, tapping the letter. They'll say you turned your daughter against her mother. We're not going to fight in their theater. We're going to give the judge what judges like: facts, structure, the child's voice. You don't get points for being wounded. You get points for being steady. We gathered what steady looks like. School attendance records showing I drive carpool and that Emily's grades, which had dipped in October, climbed again in March. Screenshots of text threads where I told Emily to call her mother. A letter from her band director about my presence at every concert, and a note from the school counselor I'd asked to check in on Emily in January when she started getting headaches that had nothing to do with weather. There were also the little things the law allows: calendars, joint communication logs, the screenshot of Kathy's flight at 9:41 p.m., and the photo she texted from my couch with a blanket up to her chin, because I had asked her to send one so Emily could see her mother was safe when she woke up the next morning. We're not going to use the vase unless we have to, Mara said. If she puts violence on the table, then yes, we show it. But this is about what's best for a 14-year-old. Not vengeance, not theater. A guardian ad litem met with Emily a week later in a room painted a color someone must have chosen from a palette called Calm. I sat in the lobby on a chair that punished tall men and counted the holes in the acoustic tiles. After an hour, the guardian came out and shook my hand in a way that said nothing and everything. We'll see you in court, she said, and it will tell you how much I wanted a script that I caught myself almost asking for a spoiler. Kathy flew in for the hearing with a lawyer who wore a suit that looked like apology and shoes that said he liked winning. Leon didn't come. I don't know if he was uninvited or uninterested. My mother sat in the back pew with a rosary inside her purse because old habits help even when they're not the same faith as the room. The judge was a woman in her 50s with shoulders like a swimmer. She kept her glasses low on her nose and listened the way my trucks listen to winter before they decide whether to start. Kathy's lawyer went first. He talked about maternal bonds and stability and the dangers of alienation, a word that sounds like science and burns like bleach when people misuse it. He said Emily was at an impressionable age and suggested gently that my house was a bunker against growth. Mara stood and built the house exactly as it is. She laid out our routines, my work hours, the all-the-time reality of school nights and clarinet practice, and how many bowls a teenager can dirty in one afternoon. She submitted the counselor's letter about headaches and the way they stopped when I rearranged Emily's week to give her more sleep and less scrolling. She didn't mention the vase. She mentioned the Band-Aid and a flight, and the way a child feels when a parent appears in the night and disappears by morning. And then she did the simplest and bravest thing: she asked the judge to hear from Emily. There's a moment in court where the heir becomes a person. The bailiff opened a side door and my daughter walked in wearing a dress she hates because it has a bow, and Converse because she is still herself, and I had to work very hard not to stand up and gather her in my arms like she was 4. She swore to tell the truth, which is easier when you don't know how to do anything else, and she sat and wrapped her hair around a finger the way her mother used to when she was nervous. Emily, the judge said, not unkindly, do you know why you're here? Emily nodded. Because grown-ups make messes, she said, and the whole room smiled at the kind of humor that is just the truth in a different dress. I love my mom, she said right away, as if to steady herself on that fact, but I want to live with my dad. Why? The judge asked. Not a trap, a door. A door. Because he's here, Emily said, searching for the right word. Like, actually here. He picks me up. He makes pasta that sometimes tastes like soap because he forgets which sponge to use, and he laughs and throws it out and we order tacos. He lets me talk about stupid friend drama like it's important, and then somehow it's not as big. He told me to call my mom even when I didn't want to. He doesn't make me choose, but if I have to choose a house, I choose the one where I sleep better. The judge asked if she was scared of anyone. Emily said no. The judge asked if anyone told her what to say. Emily said no. The judge thanked her and dismissed her, and my daughter walked out past me without looking because if she had looked, we would both have fallen apart. The order came a week later. Primary residential custody to me, joint legal decision making, a structured schedule for Kathy with clear times and clear expectations, and a line about clinically recommended family counseling, which is judged for y'all need a third party with a flashlight. It was not a victory lap, it was a map. What happened to Kathy after that is not the kind of story that likes being told out loud, but I'll tell you some pieces because people ask about karma, and I've learned karma mostly looks like people living with the consequences of their choices without music. Leon lost the job in Boston after he told the wrong man what he thought of him in an email that got forwarded one rung too high. Kathy got a temp job that turned into a full-time one until someone in HR found a photo of her and Leon at his cousin's warehouse office on a day they were both supposed to be somewhere else. And the office rumor mill in Boston is only different from Chicago's by accent. She called more often, at the right times, tried harder, and still felt like she was trying to stand on a moving train. Her sister told me as gossip weathered its way from one kitchen table to another that their mother had stopped taking her calls, saying, I don't want to hear another explanation, just tell me when you've done the work. That's a cold sentence. It's also a kind of love the Midwest doesn't know how to package gently. We did counseling, family first, then one-on-one. Emily liked the therapist. I tolerated the therapist. Kathy said she liked the therapist and then canceled 3 sessions in a row and said she'd reschedule. On the night she called on time, she and Emily talked about school and shows and boys in a way that made me believe that maybe they would get to something honest eventually. On the night she didn't, Emily would go upstairs with that hard set to her mouth that means she is building armor and I would hate everything. There was an afternoon in October, 3 months after the order, when Kathy came to town for her weekend and got coffee with me in a Starbucks that has seen better breakups than ours. She cried, not messy, not performative, just tears that had collected for too long. I didn't throw the vase, she said. That matters to me that you know that. I know, I said, but you chose the room where it was thrown. She nodded. She sipped her coffee like she wished he could fix past tense. Leon's not doing well, she said. I thought I could fix him. I thought I could be the difference. Isn't that terrible? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said, I think a lot of us think we're the special ingredient in other people's recipes. She laughed at that, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. Then she said, I'm trying to be a better mother than I was a wife, and because you should honor bravery when it shows up, I said, I see that. Emily came home early that Sunday. They had done a corn maze that Kathy narrated like a metaphor, and Emily rolled her eyes at like a joke. They hugged in the driveway, and it was awkward and sweet, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight since the Tuesday with the phone. When Kathy got in her Uber to go to O'Hare, Emily waved without crying. Progress doesn't look like a movie. It looks like a driveway where nobody shouts. Winter wrapped the city in a familiar gray. My trucks struggled for the first 5 minutes and then did their job because they are built to. Emily joined the high school band, and there is nothing quite like hearing a song you know walking past your kitchen at 8 p.m., played slightly out of tune by the person you love most. I learned to make pancakes worth waking up early for and how to unclog a bathroom sink without calling a plumber. I learned that a 14-year-old will tell you something important at exactly the moment you're most distracted, so you have to practice always being ready to pay attention. I learned that your heart can be bruised and still be good at love. Kathy called on Christmas morning. She was in a shared kitchen with a fake tree listing to one side and a window that showed the kind of Boston sky that tells you God is a fan of slate. She said Merry Christmas, and we said Merry Christmas, and the dog barked and the cinnamon rolls I overbaked made the house smell like a plan. She told Emily she was proud of her, and then she told me she was sorry, not for a particular thing, for the whole. I should have been better, she said, and I said, me too. It was true. I had ignored alarms I had believed fine was a plan. I had treated stability like a god you pray to once a week. Neither of us were villains. We were just people who let a draft under the door turn into a winter inside the house. I don't know what happens to Leon next. I stopped keeping track. Last I heard from a friend of a friend, he left the cousin's warehouse and tried to start something disruptive with no capital and less patience. People like Leon always think someone else's ladder is supposed to be their escalator. Maybe he learned, maybe he didn't. It's not my business anymore, and that sentence still feels like a luxury I earned the hard way. The thing people want to know, the thing I wanted to know when I was in the middle of it, is whether the ache goes away. Here's my answer. It stops running the whole show. It becomes a chair in the corner you don't have to sit in anymore. Some days you forget it's there. Some days you catch sight of it and nod like an old coworker. And some days, yes, you sit in it for a few minutes and then you stand up and make dinner because the kid you love has to eat. If this story needs a moral, I don't think it's about revenge or the satisfaction of watching someone else's life fall apart. Karma isn't the universe operating a scoreboard. Karma is watching a person follow the path they chose until they can't pretend it's a shortcut. Kathy didn't get struck by lightning, she got struck by reality. She lost some friends who decided fidelity mattered to them more than complicated love did. She lost a job because office politics are brutal, and someone was always going to use her story to tell a different one about themselves. She lost the benefit of the doubt with a daughter who had to become older than she wanted to be. That's not satisfying in the movie sense, but there's a quiet righteousness to it that feels like the world turning the right direction. As for me, I learned that the best thing I could do for Emily wasn't to win, it was to stay. To be the man who showed up and kept showing up, the man who cooked and failed and ordered tacos, the man who answered the phone at 9:41 and still said, "No, that's not on me," without turning to stone. If love is the work, then steadiness is the craft. If there's justice here, it's that steadiness got the life it was trying to build. What would you have done? Opened the door or kept it closed? Would you have chased Boston for answers, or would you have tended the life in front of you until it was strong enough to stand? Tell me what you think in the comments, and if this story kept you listening, tap like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to hear that steadiness can win.